Hey, how are you guys? I'm here at Conference House Park with my friend John Kilcullen, the director of Conference House Park, and we had to give you a little guided history tour of the Conference House.
Hey Cliff, great. Welcome to Conference House. Hi guys, welcome. So let's take a walk at Conference House Park. It's the southernmost, as you know, the southernmost point in New York State. Can't get any further than that, and I'll have Mr. Hagan figure out what the northernmost part of New York State is. But this is the southernmost part. So now, Cliff, I think you know we're walking towards the Raritan Bay and the Conference House. And what's neat about Conference House, and as a naturalist, I think your students know that about you, right? That
Yes,
you
they
love-
certainly do. I love
I know
nature.
you probably hear all about this stuff from
I
Mr.
love
Hagan.
nature. I love Staten Island.
And nature is wonderful. Staten Island is wonderful. So if you can get out here, get out here. But the park is, like I said, on the southern end of Staten Island. It's 265 acres. You might not have known that.
I did not know it was that big.
Yeah, and it has 3 miles of shorefront along the Arthur Kill to my right, and to the left is the Raritan Bay going out to Sandy Hook. And what's neat about it, as a naturalist yourself, it has different habitats. So it has maritime forest with some juniper and holly and oak, and then it has some inland forest which has some beech and more oak, red maple, and so forth. So it's really a lot packed into 265 acres. So it's a really great little park. Some open lawn, which you'll see in a little bit. We have 5 historic houses. And what I like to say about the park, and for you students who are going to come out, it has history, nature, outdoors, and recreation all put together. So it's really
Terrific package.
It has everything. So you can visit the different houses during the year. You can take walks along the trails. There's about 6 miles of trail in the park. So you can loop around, and the park extends from the end of Highland Boulevard all the way around up towards Page Avenue. So
And there are no hills here, so it's nice and flat.
It's nice and flat. But what's neat about it is that the park has some bluffs, where it's about 75 to 100
some
feet.
cliffs.
Some
we
cliffs,
say?
but I'm pumped. Very good. So the bluffs overlooking the Raritan, and you'll find those similarly at Mount Loretto. So
Yeah.
kids, that's a really neat thing about Staten Island. You're all, don't know what neighborhood you live in, but Staten Island is not flat. Even here, as Cliff just said, it's relatively flat, but there are a lot of ups and downs. So you really have a nice topography when you visit the park.
So how about some of the history? It's an amazing place.
Well, the history goes back thousands of years. Thank you. That. So the Native Americans, the Lenape Nation, which extended from the Delaware Bay all the way through New Jersey, up through New York and Long Island, and up to the Connecticut River Valley in Connecticut. And what's neat about, so in addition to the Conference House, the Ward's Point archaeological site was designated in 1993. A lot older than you guys, not older than us, but in 1993 as the best example of pre-Columbian contact. That'll be an SAT you guys can figure.
Columbian contact.
So you
Very
can
good.
look that up when Mr. Hagan shows you that. So just it was the best example of the Native Americans living here. So it had artifacts of cooking and hunting. And I'll give it away. Pre-Columbian means there was no old world influence.
Before Christopher Columbus.
Thank
Wow.
you. So you might be learning about some of that. But so the Native Americans here thousands of years, and then fast forward to about 1600.
200 years after Columbus.
Thank you.
Sure.
Helping me out with my math.
Post-Columbus.
So about the 1600s, the English came. Christopher Billop was a naval officer in the English Navy, was given a land grant. And a land grant is the crown, the king, King George, said, okay, different folks were given land. He was given about 1,000 acres, roughly.
About a quarter of that property is still maintained as Conference House Park.
See, Cliff's a
My
teacher.
goodness. And I don't even teach math.
Doing all the math. This old brain can't get it. But so roughly for any of the students who know, roughly Richard Avenue, where Mount Loretto Church and State Park is, all the way down, wrapping around into the town of Tottenville. is about 1,000 acres.
Huge piece of property.
So now much of that has been developed, as Cliff just said. About a quarter of it was preserved in Conference House Park. Little by little, it was reacquired. It started with just the Conference House, and then it expanded as the city, got parcels.
Now, this Conference House is the Billop House. Yes, the Billop family had lived here.
So Christopher Billop, I said, was a British naval officer, and if you could pan around and just take a quick peek at it. And
why don't we walk a little closer?
Okay. And he built the house, and we're going to see a little bit. Built with local field stone, locally harvested oak, red oak. Folks can look up what a red oak is. And it was standing for 200 years, and then, or about a little over 200 years, some local residents stepped in to try to save it, because as you can imagine, that the building really had seen better days.
Sure.
And they knew the significance, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And they saved it. They put money towards it. And
now maybe you could quickly tell us why Staten Island is part of New York and not New Jersey.
Well, what we'll see, the local legend is that New York and New Jersey, since Staten Island sits in the little elbow of New Jersey, Sandy Hook to our south, Perth Amboy to our north, it was almost geographically part of New Jersey. So there was a boat race around the island to someone representing New Jersey, Christopher Billop representing
So
New
the man
York.
who lived here represented New York.
Correct. And they sailed, and remember, these were not power boats, these were sailboats using
there were no engines then.
Wind power, and New York won the race, as legend says, and then the island became part of New York State.
Fabulous.
So if you look on a map, kids, you'll see Staten Island, and I love Staten Island just as much as Cliff. You really see how unique it is, because it sits really in a really neat geographic spot. It has the best of northern
I like to say Staten Island is the center of the world. Everything that has important in the world has ever happened in some way.
Exactly, you're so right.
Began or ended here on Staten Island.
And I always like to say it's not the end of New York City, it's the beginning of New York City.
So very good.
When you come across, we have the Raritan River, the Raritan Bay. Everyone has to pass through Staten Island to get to much of the rest of the city. Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan in some cases, and Long Island. So really, it is the center of the world.
Terrific.
So let's take a walk.
Maybe we can stop here. Why don't you get a picture of the house, honey?
So this is the rear part of the house. This is the caretakers. It was added. The main part was built in 1680, and this was built about 100 years later as an extension.
Nice.
And Cliff, you probably know this. In addition to the wonderful forested areas, there are a lot of wonderful individual trees growing throughout the property. And as there's one right behind us, this large sycamore, one of my favorite. Not as old as the house, probably close to 100 years old, but it's an American sycamore with the brownish bark at the bottom, and then it fades into a nice light colored bark. Really one of my favorite trees, and there are some others throughout the park.
So the bark changes as the tree gets older.
As it gets
like
older.
Mr. Hagen's hair has gone from blonde to gray
And
as I get older.
Mr. Kilcullen's. And I still have some of it. So it's a great day to come out here, and given what's happening, it's still a great time to get out to the park and enjoy everything that Staten Island has to offer. And I know you students hear this all the time from Mr. Hagen. I mean, you really have it well and perfect on Staten Island, because we have the best of everything.
Oh my! I'm sorry. Speaking of old trees, take a look at that old tree.
Yeah. That's a wonderful mulberry tree, and I'll just stand out of the way. But that tree, Cliff, is one of the great trees. So New York City Parks identifies great trees, and that tree is a mulberry, and it was planted in honor of Benjamin Franklin, who was one of the participants in the conference. And some of you may know, he tried to bring silk manufacturing to the United States. Silk was done in Asia and China, but the mulberry didn't prove a good food source for the silkworm, and it sort of disbanded. And what we've done with invasive species, we just had Troop 5 clear out a lot of species. So the tree,
Yeah, it looks terrific.
the tree is getting a lot of new accolades because it was covered in. If you remember, it was covered in a mess of
I
vines.
do. Couldn't see it anymore.
We kept it. So I'm happy to say I wasn't here that day. My staff was here, and they came by and I told them what to do, and they actually took the fence. We put the fence around because the tree is actually a little unstable, and we're trying to keep people away from it. I thought we'd have to get new fence, Cliff.
Yeah.
But they found the whole thing. They unbent it. They were
Fabulous.
like, it was
Great group of kids. Troop
they-
5. That
had
all
a
lady
great
star of
kid.
the city.
Well, yes.
All
yes.
lady star of the city.
Yes.
Wonderful.
I
Thank
just
you,
know.
guys.
Yes. So let's just walk into the sun. We can get more of the.
So this tree was planted in honor of Benjamin Franklin. I
Right.
understand he spent some time here.
He
You want to
did.
tell that story?
I guess we can now that we're here in front. And if you so we're in front of the historic conference house, and if you just hold it while I talk a little, because I know you're getting tired of seeing two men talk about the house. So this is the historic conference house. It's made from local field stone and also ballast stone. And if you're wondering, you know what fieldstone is, but ballast stone, when the colonies were bringing goods back to England, the ships were rode low in the water because they were full of cargo. But coming back to the colonies at the time, they needed something to weigh the ships down. So some of the stone was ballast stone, B-A-L-L-A-S-T, ballast stone. And it would weigh the boat down, and then they discarded it when they got here to put goods on to the ships, and they just used it for construction. It's a French style design, and it was restored in the 1920s by a concerned group of citizens. And what Cliff had asked about, Benjamin Franklin, along with John Adams and Edward Rutledge, came here from New Jersey to try to have a peace conference with they were representing the Continental Congress, and they were trying to have a peace conference with Lord Howe, who represented the Crown, to try to end the war. Unfortunately,
You mean Benjamin Franklin stood right here with
he
these
sure,
steps?
he sure did. He
On these steps.
stood right on those steps with Mr.
Fabulous.
Higgins. So
By Benjamin Franklin
to
impersonating.
my left and Mr. Higgins' right, this was the room that the conference took place. And at the time this house was chosen, as you know, Staten Island still has the least population of all the 5 boroughs. It was close enough to New Jersey, which was still a colonist
That's
stronghold.
New Jersey across the water.
Yeah, so this is the confluence of the Raritan River, Arthur Kill, and Raritan Bays. But they chose this location because it was a neutral territory. They tried to come up with a treaty. They weren't able to, so the war continued for another 7 years. But Benjamin Franklin was here representing the burgeoning colonies, and so that's the history and the significance.
So
of it.
I could envision Benjamin Franklin with his men rowing across from Perth Amboy,
Well, they did.
pulling up on this beach and walking up this lawn, and sauntering right into the heart of the British Empire.
Correct. And the reason they chose, one of the other reasons they chose it, Benjamin Franklin's son was the royal governor of New Jersey, so they were familiar with this location, and that's why they were staying in New Jersey, and they literally came right over. It was a simple
Very
road.
good.
It's less than a mile across, so it's pretty simple. So there you have it. So this is one of the 5 historic houses here. Some of the other ones that are not within walking distance from where we are now are just to the north, and those are open. And at the visitor center, there are park maps that you can get to take you through the trails. And that's the newly renovated pavilion, which gives wonderful views of the harbor. Hopefully you can see it. And it's just the lawn is a perfect place to just hang out. And
Well, this certainly is a perfect place, my friend John. I
Yes.
appreciate your time here
Yes.
today.
Thank
you
you.
definitely shared some terrific history with us, and I think we have a lot to digest and consider
Yes.
moving forward. So
Yes.
thank you very much. I
You're
shake
welcome.
your hand, but
yes,
things are
considering.
different, yeah.
And if you come down, kids, look for me. I'm at the visitor center. I'd love to.
tell them you're a friend of Mr. Hagen.
Mr. Higgins. All right. Thank you, and thank you to our director and filmmaker.
Thank you.
All right.